right, for today's class, we will be doing a reading from start to finish. So we're on week 10. Yay! All right, doing a reading from start to finish. So there's a lot to this. So helpful hint, always have water handy during class because, and during a session, because you will, when you're speaking as much as you do when you're doing a session, you will have a dry mouth at some point a lot of the time. So besides keeping your mouth moist while talking for extended period of time, it also helps to keep your body and energy clear of unwanted energies that you may encounter during a session. Now we have a few items to cover before going into the how-to, the actual how-to on readings. Fishing. Fishing is a big reading no-no. The only kind of fishing you should do is by catching an actual fish. Information fishing with a client will shut you down faster than I can say boo. Real readers don't fish unless they are hitting a blank wall. If you hit a wall in a session, then back away from it and go a different direction. Take a couple deep breaths and, take a moment to breathe and clear yourself, then go back into your session in a different direction. Sometimes hitting a wall only means that there isn't any further information for you to receive in the direction that you were going. So sometimes when we go up those, branches on the link or the tree of energy link, sometimes that branch stops. So it's good to maybe, when you're getting a message, asking for confirmation isn't the end of the world. So like when you're talking to someone's guides, you can actually ask them things. Is this the end of that stream of information? Should I keep going forward? Sometimes it helps you to know that you are on the right energetic path with your client. So getting that confirmation can help you to know that you either need to keep going or that you need to maybe stop and go a different direction. However, you should understand that some clients will come into a session so skeptical that they won't say a word the entire time. We've kind of talked about that in a different class too. You should be able to read their energy, speak with their guides, and communicate with their spirits to find out what to say. An example is I have had clients that have come in and didn't speak for an entire hour. They'll literally just sit there and not say a word. However, I was able to maintain my self-faith, maintain the energetic connections, and trust the messages that were coming through. So you need to really trust what's coming through, not what's coming from the client. Sometimes it can be confusing. A few times the same clients have started crying right in the middle of the session because they said that everything I was sharing, the messages, were accurate. All of the messages were coming through that were accurate, but they didn't want to move. They didn't want to give anything away. Others have managed to make it to the end of a session without even making a move or a facial expression. Like they sit there like this. Then they burst at the end and share everything that they are connecting with. Point being, you should never rely on expressions, body language, or your client talking as a crutch for a session. So relying on those things is a form of fishing. Only rely on the actual messages that are coming through. You'll occasionally work with a client that theoretically doesn't connect with anything that you are saying or sharing. When this happens, maintain your self-faith. That's so important, and push through. Just have them write down the messages that you're receiving. So if something isn't making sense to them, I always tell people, make sure you write it down if it doesn't make sense. In fact, I'll say it a few times during a session, a lot of times. They may not understand what you are saying right now due to either reading amnesia or simply the information you're sharing may not have happened yet. Just remember, information fishing is a huge no-no. You do not want to try to pry information out of your client to try to give yourself a crutch to make it through a session. Stay strong with your ethics. So on to readings. Cold readings. There's a type of a reading that is an absolute no-no reading, also called a cold reading. This is outside of fishing. Cold readings are readings where a reader will say things that are clearly relatable to just about anybody. For example, I see that you have had financial problems in your past. I feel that you have had relationship issues. I sense that you are having emotional ups and downs right now. Of course, these things have happened to them. They're human. And the emotional ups and downs, of course they have. That's why they're sitting in front of you. So basically, cold readings would be saying things to people that could apply to just about anybody. Making statements to a client, like the examples that I gave, is basically a form of fishing for a response. The readers that do that, they're sitting there waiting for you to respond to what they say so that they can try to cold read further, give you more quote unquote details that, again, may be broad spectrum. I have watched people do cold readings before and have just taken a deep breath and walked away. Generalized statements may take up time, but they do not help your client. And our whole goal is to help the person that we're working with, right? If you're working in the light, then you're working with ethics. You are the only one that ends up feeling the guilt afterwards if you're not truly reading for someone. If you're fishing, you're going to feel it because you're empathic, you're intuitive, you're psychic. You're going to actually feel the guilt from something like that. It is better to stop a reading than to fraudulently cold read for somebody. They may be frustrated by it, but will have a lot more respect for you in the long run if you say something like, I'm really just not picking up on things, or maybe you're blocked that day, or maybe there's a trigger that blocked you. Things like that can happen to any reader. So there are two distinct types of authentic readings: spontaneous and scheduled. It is important to know the difference in the type of reading that you are doing so that you are aware of the type of delivery that you should have when you're sharing the messages. Spontaneous readings consist of empathically feeling the need to share a message with somebody. How many of you have been around people and have felt like, oh, I just need to share this message with this person? It's kind of an overwhelming feeling, right? However, it wasn't something that they came to you to do. Maybe they just came to you as a friend or something along those lines. A spirit communicates a message with you. Like, for example, a spirit communicates a message with you to share with someone you either know or might not know before they have reached out to you for a reading. That's before they've actually said something about needing help. Okay. Is it the right time? Spontaneous readings are very valid and have their time and place. So they are valid, authentic readings. But there's times when they're not. Like when you're more relaxed because you're intoxicated, like say you're intoxicated or you're feeling more brave because of that, that is not the time to do a spontaneous reading. If you're helping a friend through the loss of someone, you're emotionally connected to that person, very emotionally connected, and may need to evaluate if that is actually a good time to share the information. A spontaneous reading should only be done for the benefit of the person you are sharing the messages with, not to fill up your ego. Because sometimes if somebody's hurting and in pain, sometimes it's just not the right time to share messages. It might be just a better time to listen. So listen to your intuition on these situations, trust your gut. And then now there's scheduled readings. Those consist of a session that has been planned or scheduled, like the literal term. Generally, all paid sessions would be considered scheduled because that's something that somebody signed up for in advance. Little water break. A session where you are reading at a venue, that is also, like, say you're at a show and there's a whole bunch of people doing readings. People go to like holistic festivals and body, mind, spirit festivals. They go to these things because a lot of times they're looking to get a reading. So their intention was set before they went in. So that is what I would consider like a scheduled reading. A session where someone that wasn't planned on your end to read for, but they came to you with the anticipation of getting a reading. So you might not know who you're reading for, but their intention was to get a reading with you or somebody there. Again, they had already planned to get that. So that's what we consider scheduled. When someone sits for a scheduled reading, they have already shared with either God or the universe, whatever your religious background is, that they are ready to receive information or talk with loved ones from the other side. You will still want to discuss a few things like your disclosure with them. Unlike spontaneous readings, a scheduled reading, the client is in a state where they are generally ready to receive messages. So, a spontaneous reading, people may not be either in an emotional state or even a physical space to receive a reading. I'm thinking of a psychic that I saw on a TV show that I won't name, that did a reading spontaneously, or so they say, for someone behind a deli counter. And all I could think was, one, obviously that was staged. Two, do you really want to go into a deli and start reading for somebody? I mean, that person may be caught off guard and they might be politely saying, sure, why not? But you need to be careful with those kind of things because it may not actually be what their intention was for the day. But listen to your intuition, because it may be that they needed help and they sent it out to the universe and there you are. So always trust your gut on that. The emotional state of your client is very important. You always want to take that into consideration. When you're doing a reading for someone, you always want to consider, what emotional state are they currently in? Using your empathic abilities, that's what we have those for. Especially if you're going to be a reader, you really need to access that and pull through some information. You want to feel their energy and communicate with them accordingly. Whenever you do a reading, you want to implement the 3 C's for your client or sitter: caring, compassion, and consideration. I say these things all the time because caring, compassion, and consideration are so vitally important. When you're using your empathy to read somebody, you are trying to be compassionate. You are trying to consider their emotional state. And the whole reason that we do readings is because we care about people. So as a general rule, people don't go to see someone for a reading unless they are in a state of mind where they need help or guidance. You will play 2 roles as a reader, both as the psychic reader and the compassionate coach. Some people will come in to see you very guarded. Some people will be an open book. Some are talkers and some just aren't talkers. Also, as a reader, it is part of your job to read the whole situation, the big picture. Okay. That is how you will know how to communicate the messages that you receive in a way that your client will understand and will be more open to accept the messages. If you have a client that comes in totally guarded, this does happen fairly regularly. They'll sit down and they're, talking with their arms crossed and their legs are crossed, and then maybe they're like this, or they're just shut down. You will want to help guide them to take a deep breath and open up their arms and relax. I will literally tell my clients, okay, I can feel your energy. You're very nervous. I can tell. So I just need you to kind of go and take a deep breath so that you can relax. I said, I'm not scary. I kind of make them, I try to make people giggle sometimes because it kind of breaks that tension. Sometimes it's helpful to bring an air of laughter to the situation to help them relax by saying, for example, something like, I know I'm pretty intimidating, but I promise I won't bite. Don't actually do that part. But yeah, you want them to be able to kind of, relax and maybe sink into a chair. That's why I always have in my office, I have very relaxing chairs for my clients. Though this is just an example, you can see how right off the get-go that could help somebody to relax and not find you so intimidating. When people come into a psychic reading situation, they can be very intimidated. I have a lot of first timers that come in and, maybe they heard about my reputation. So they come in, they feel comfortable coming in, but this is something they've never done before. And so they're nervous, they're scared, they don't know what to anticipate. And so helping them to relax just helps break that tension. Like I said, that energetic tension, it helps you to connect with them too. Helps you connect with their energy better if they're not completely shut down. So people will often come to a reader with a misguided conception that you know everything and can see everything. For any of you that have done readings, you probably know what I'm talking about with this. I always tell people, I'm like, I can only share messages with you that I'm given. And so sometimes it's good to put that in your disclosure. Sometimes it's good just to share throughout a session if it feels like timing is appropriate. That's why you have to watch the whole picture while you're doing a reading, including whether or not your client's nervous. We all, as readers, and, being in that kind of role of authority, because when somebody comes to you, you are kind of in an authoritative role. So we will all have performance doubts and fears with our abilities. It happens. Again, you're human. Congratulations. So you don't want to go into a reading with the added pressure of someone else's unrealistic expectations. They do come to you thinking that you'll be able to see and know everything that they need to know. And then sometimes messages come through exactly how they're supposed to, and that's what you need to remind them of. Ironically, if you lower their expectations before you start, a few fantastic things happen. You significantly relax. You, as the reader, significantly relax, which, remember, we've talked about this, where you need to be relaxed. You need to relax your vessel. You need to clear yourself so that you can take that pressure off. A relaxed reader is a better reader. So you significantly relax by taking pressure off of yourself, thus you will do a better job and are more open to receive clearer messages. When you receive messages for your client, they are more open to what you are sharing versus being very skeptical and guarded. So if you can have them relax and then, maybe lower their expectations a little bit by explaining, hey, you're human, you only get the messages that you get, they are actually a lot of times more at ease too. So what to share? What messages should you share with your clients? Any and all information that you receive from a spirit or guide should be shared. The important part, the delivery of those messages, that's your responsibility, how you share the messages. You wouldn't have received the information or messages were you not supposed to share it, even if the messages don't make sense to you. I've used this example quite a few times, but it's like I had a client that was here one time and I saw 3 floating oranges. And it made absolutely zero sense to me. But as soon as I shared that message with them, it completely made sense to them. In fact, they even started crying over 3 floating oranges. So that also reminded me, it was a nice, gentle reminder that I'm not the one that's supposed to know everything about their reading. I'm just supposed to share the messages. So the messages aren't for you to understand. They are for your client to understand, period. And again, if it doesn't make sense to them, just have them write it down. It may make sense later. I had a client that came in and I saw an image of her and her grandfather and a whole bunch of strawberries floating around them. And didn't make sense to her, didn't make sense to me. I told her to write it down. She went home and was able to, she was going through some pictures one day and found a picture with her and her grandfather sitting in a strawberry field. And so those are the kind of things that may not make sense right now, but it is another way that spirit will convey messages that are specifically for them to understand, and that confirms to them that that was indeed their grandfather, for example. Your position is to be the vessel in which the information flows, not the decider of what you should share or not share. However, there is a difference between not sharing information and sharing information kindly and ethically. I always tell people, even in my disclosure, that if somebody comes through singing, I don't do singing, but I'll try to explain the song to them. I don't want to scare people from my singing. They're already nervous enough from ghosts being there. So those are the kind of things that you can kind of share in your disclosure too, if you don't do singing or anything along those lines. But by sharing the information kindly, it helps kind of ease the messages a lot of the times. Because sometimes spirit can come through some of them come through fairly aggressive. So you never know what you're going to get, because they were just people too. That is why I don't think that anyone should immediately run out and do readings unless they have finished this entire course, because some messages are received that could be scary for your client, like seeing death. How do you interpret something like that, right? So, for example, you receive a message that shows somebody's husband, in this, for example, somebody's husband looks like he's dying or he's going to die, right? Read into the message. What is he doing? Is he grabbing his chest? So maybe you're receiving a message that shows somebody's husband having a heart attack. How do you handle this? You really, really have to evaluate that message, because you don't want to come out and be like, looks like your husband's going to have a heart attack. Sorry about your bad luck. That's not kind delivery. That is not using your 3 C's. Caring, compassion, consideration. So how do you deliver this message? Number one, we do not predict death. Nobody knows when death is going to happen. We can sense things like health problems that may lead to somebody suffering that consequence if it's not addressed. It's the same thing with the future. That's why I always tell people, I'm like, we do not see the future. We see glimpses of what could happen if you continue on this path. This is a prime example of that. If the husband, for example, doesn't go and get help with the heart problems he's experiencing, because who here has a stubborn husband? Don't tell him I said that. Anyways, that's why I'm saying, so that might be the universe's way of pushing him because maybe it's not his time. So that message that comes through puts a lot of responsibility on your back for how you're going to share it. So that is when you share with that person that you see that their husband or like her husband may be experiencing health problems related to the heart. Then you can say that their guide or loved one shared this message with you so that you can encourage her husband, so that she can encourage her husband to go to the doctor and get it checked out. So did you actually see somebody dying? Your message may have been that. How are you supposed to relay it? That's your responsibility, being a good, ethical, kind, caring, considerate, and compassionate reader. I dare you to say that 3 times fast. Okay, so very important. Most likely you will only receive messages in such a drastic way, like seeing death, when guides and loved ones are trying to relay the importance of the message for you to share. They will put some crazy stuff in front of you sometimes. And so sometimes it's just a way of saying, this is urgent, this is time sensitive, please relay this, so hopefully you share the message in a way that encourages your client to see the urgency with deciding to help change the outcome. Water break real quick. Now let's get started on doing actual reading. Woo! Been looking forward to this for a while. Now that I've got all my reading safety disclosures out of the way. So when you're starting a session, when you have a client or sitter that sits down with you to do a reading, there are a few little steps to check off on your list before you get started. Have yourself and your space clean and energetically cleared. The safety first thing I've said 500 times. Now you know why I've said it, because it's that important, especially between clients too. World's fastest meditation and clearing with white light. Make sure that you eliminate as many distractions as possible before they sit down. For example, pets. Don't start your laundry beforehand. Buzzers go off, things like that. If you're working from home, don't start your dishes. If you are doing a session with someone, make sure there's no distractions like kids or spouses. I mean, I kicked my husband out right before this class started because I didn't want the distraction. I love him. He's cute, but yeah, he had to go. Family, lighting. Make sure your lighting's good. Fans, you don't want a whole bunch of white noise in the background that could distract you and your client. Music, I know a lot of people like to play music. If you're going to do that to kind of set the mood for when somebody's walking in, that's fine. Make sure you turn it off before you start the session. If your client or sitter isn't comfortable, then your session will be more challenging. Hence the reason that I said I have nice, big, fluffy, comfortable vintage chairs because that floats my boat and I have to look at them all day. But I made sure that there's, pillow, believe it or not, very soft pillows. It's a comforting thing for people. And when you're working with people and this is highly emotional work that you're doing, sometimes something as simple as having a soft pillow for them to hug can be very soothing for them and help them relax. Make sure that you have a pen or pencil and pad of paper available for them to take notes. I tell everybody bring one. Half of them don't listen. The people that know me also know that I always have a pad of paper and pens and pencils available for them. So at this point, that's kind of a gimme. But make sure you have those available. Also, make sure that your space either doesn't have a smell, like maybe it's just neutral, doesn't have a smell, or smells pleasant. No one wants to smell pet urine or kitty litter or cigarette smoke or, even the dinner that you cooked the night before. Nobody wants to smell that when you're having a session. If you're in an office space where you don't have those distractions, the opposite of not having a smell is a lot of people will light incense. Why? Because it's soothing for the person that's doing the reading. but is it comfortable for the person that's getting the session? So, just take these little things into consideration. Have your reading tools available at hand if you use any, like crystal ball, my little crystal ball. I always have this right here and on hand. Sometimes I'll even have grounding stones. I'll grab those really quick so that you can see them. I use boji stones sometimes that I will, these are boji stones. I'll have my clients hold these if they're really ungrounded, so that way it helps calm them down. Sometimes I'll even give them, I collect these little river rocks that I give to my clients, because you can sit there and just do this with them. So sometimes I'll just give those away to my clients so that they have something to also keep them calm during a session. Have an in-session sign ready to use if you have a door or a table to put it on, so that way, say you're in a group situation where you're at like one of the holistic festivals, something along those lines. Have something available so that if you have the front of your booth, that you can put a little sign in the front that says, shh, in session, or thank you for being quiet, I'm in session, something polite, so people are like, oh, oops, and for me, like I work out of my house, so I have a sign that I put on my front door so that people do not ring the doorbell. I have shh in session actually on my door so that there's consideration from the people that approach the door. Make sure to have tissues, for example, Kleenex, available for your clients if they become emotional and need them. I have joked at this point, because I've done this for so long, that I should have taken up stock in Kleenex, because I go through a lot of it. Thank you, Costco, for the plethora of packages of Kleenex also. Okay, so we're going to move on to the disclosure information. This is vitally important if you're going to do readings. This is good for not only if you're planning to do them professionally, or if you are just maybe helping some friends or family out. This is still stuff that's good to share either way, and good to kind of have in your back pocket, maybe your front pocket. So a disclosure, you're going to want to write it out, practice it, and share it to make sure that your client understands. Here are some suggestions for what you may want to write in your disclosure. And I'm going to use a lot of my own examples during this so that I can share them with you. And you can take them and tweak them and make them your own, or you can just copy them verbatim if it works for you. Okay. So example, hello, client sitter name. My name is Jennifer. It's so nice to meet you. This is somebody that's new. And then you have a little chit chat. So like if somebody comes to sit down with you, I always have a little bit of conversation. Oh, glad you made it. Weather's great. Very generic conversation topics. It helps them relax a little bit. It helps them to feel more comfortable coming into your space, and it helps them connect with you. Tell your client or sitter, I'm turning off my cell phone ringer so it doesn't go off during our session and cause a distraction. The goal is to politely have them realize that they need to turn off their ringer. If they don't get the hint, please ask them nicely to turn their ringer off, as it will distract you and them. I've had clients that have had their phones go off in the middle of a session, and I do have to stop. And I have to take a deep breath sometimes, because it's distracting. It can break your concentration. And so you want to make sure that if that does happen, because it will at some point, if you're going to do this for more than one or two people, that you are able to recover from the distraction too. Okay. Let your client or sitter know that, quote, I am setting a timer on my phone so that I don't overtap. Anybody that knows me knows I talk a lot. I tend to lose track of time while doing readings, and I have another client after you. But don't worry, we still have a few minutes after the timer goes off to finish. Smile while you're saying it, so that they're comforted with the fact that you're not just trying to rush them out. Most of the time, I give myself about 10, 15 minutes in between clients to try to make sure that I have a little bit of a squeaky zone in case there is an emotional situation going on, because you don't want to just be like, sorry, your time's up. People get offended by that, it turns out. So start the timer and then set the phone down when you do tell them that, so that they can see that you're starting a timer. But one thing that I do tell people is make sure that your timer's on like buzz, so that it just maybe buzzes or has some very gentle tone that goes off when you're doing a session. So that way, and always put it face down. So nobody wants to sit there and watch the timer. Neither do you. It'll be distracting. So set your timer, here, I'll show you. So like on my phone, I have a timer and I will set it like for an hour session, I'll set it for 50 minutes. And then I hit start and then I put my phone face down so that you're not watching it, they're not watching it. Your timer will do the work for you that way. Begin your disclosure discussion. So after you set your phone down, that's when you kind of want to start telling them about, the things that you need to disclose to them. Tweak this if there's a phone session, because a lot of times they're not going to be able to see you unless you're doing a video phone session, but that would be virtual. So occasionally this is the point where people ask me if they can record their sessions. I generally strongly advise against this, as things change and clients may later misconstrue something said in a session. That's one reason for doing it. Okay. I won't go into the multiple ones, but I will tell you a few that are very important. So also for those of you who may have any form of stage fright, this does not help, knowing you're being recorded. Due to that, it can strongly interfere with the quality of a reading. If you are, I've had people, I've had producers and things like that come up to me, literally stick a camera in my face and say, okay, tell me something about blah, blah, blah for like 30 seconds. And I'm like, I literally get this like bright light, deer in a headlight situation. And so, if you know that someone's going to do something like that, like a recording, you need to listen to the rest of the reasons why it's probably not a good idea aside of just stage fright. Then there's the issue of having your client sign a non-disclosure agreements. This is the legal mumbo jumbo. Okay. I was schooled by a lawyer on letting people, whether or not to let people record things. Ironically, even though the person paid for the session, it is your voice and likeness that they want to record. So unless you want to give someone the opportunity to share your voice and or likeness, your image, your picture, your video, whatever it is, anywhere they want and with whomever they choose, then you would need to have them fill out a ton of information and paperwork, along with requesting editing rights and so on and so forth. It's just better to just say no. There's the legal implications that can come along with the various interpretations of the messages that you share with someone. I mean, as much as I'd love to say everyone's going to go out there and be an absolutely 100% perfect reader, you are human. So things may come out that you're just like, wow, I can't believe I just said that. Or let's just go to the next topic because whoops, I slipped up. Or you will make mistakes and that's okay. But if it's being recorded, you don't need it to go viral. I could go on for a while, but simply put, it can really get messy. So it's just easier to let them know that you don't allow recordings. Okay. Who likes my little ghosty picture I did? I thought that was hilarious. Mainly the reason I don't like to allow this is that electronics are highly affected during readings due to the intense energy levels of both the session and the spirits. I mean, guides have crazy energy too, plus clients tend not to take notes if they think it's being recorded. When I used to allow recordings a long time ago, most of my clients reported either poor recordings, short recordings, like their phone only, got recorded 5 minutes of it, or no recording at all, or they came in with a fully charged phone and their phone has 1% left and they were trying to record, but it shut off the recording option because of that. Or it can be very discouraging for your clients because they think they're walking away with a full recording of something and that they can't go back and actually hear it. And then if they haven't taken notes, they're very sad. Okay. And it's another reason that occasionally throughout a session, I will actually tell my clients, maybe you want to write that down if it's something that's important that comes through or something that doesn't make sense. Like I said, it is devastating for them, where if they had taken notes, they would still at least have the highlights of their session to keep. Even if they only took a few notes, at least they'd have something. And I mean, I've even had clients tell me that they recorded, they've done like back, like when I was allowing this, that they had recorded a session and my voice didn't even show up on it. You have to consider the six sensory implications of doing a session. We're not just working with the third dimensional world. We're not just working with our physical bodies. We're working with a high level of energy. And believe it or not, electronics are affected, strongly affected by that. So on the disclosure, when you're getting started, you will want to ask your client something like, have you ever had a reading before? Anybody that's had a reading with me knows that I ask this every time that somebody sits down with me. No matter what their answer is, either yes or no, then you can go into onto explaining what your disclosure is. Because you can say something like, well, let me explain a little bit about how I do readings. First, if something doesn't make sense during our session, please write it down. It may make sense later. Very important in the disclosure. Like I said, you might want to go back into the class later and take notes on this if you're not able to keep up with the notes right now. One of the things that I implore my clients to do is to make sure that they take notes. I know, broken record, but especially on the messages that don't make sense during the session, this isn't just for them. A lot of the times when you're a reader and you're doing sessions and something comes across that doesn't make sense, a lot of times people look at you like, especially the really skeptical ones that are just like, prove it to me. Something doesn't make sense, all of a sudden they go and they shut down. If you have them open up their arms and write down a note, it relaxes them. They figure they can go back to it later and see if it makes sense. Okay. This is twofold. A lot of the stuff that I'm telling you to tell them in the disclosure is for you and for them. Okay, back to the disclosure. Also, I try to translate messages as precisely and as close to as exact as I can. If I decide to interpret something, I will let you know that is my interpretation of the message from either the spirit or the guide that is communicating it, that I'm sharing. So you want to let them know this so that way, what's settled saying, assuming things, makes an ass out of you and me. When you assume something, if you're as directionally challenged as I am, sometimes I'll think something's over here and that's what it means when really it was over here and it meant something completely different. So that's why it's always good as an ethical reader to make sure that you tell them, this is what I believe that it means. This is my assumption. This is my interpretation. All right. Here we go. Guides and spirits will sometimes share messages with me that aren't meant for me to understand. And again, remember, we're still sharing a disclosure with a client. I will share them with you how they are sharing the messages with me. If they don't make sense, then please write them down, as they may not have happened yet. I don't consider myself able to see the future. It is more like a glimpse into what could happen. Please know that it is only your guides or loved ones' way of showing you what could happen if you stay on the same path. You are the one that has control over changing any of the outcomes. So vitally important to share with people, because you really are seeing a glimpse of what could happen, not necessarily what will happen. Okay. We get that information because it helps us to it gives our clients the ability to make a decision later on whether or not they want their path to still continue the same direction. Okay. When I start the session, please allow me to connect and relay messages from your guides and loved ones before asking any questions. I can't, like I said, everything in this disclosure is like stuff that I've said so many times over many, many years, because of how important it is, because of situations that I have been in and have confronted and things I've had to deal with throughout sessions over the years. That's why this disclosure is important. And that's why I hit on some of these points for you. Once I am comfortable with my connections, then I will ask you if you have any questions. Do you have any questions about how the session will work before we get started? This is where you let them ask questions about how the session may work technically, like the technicalities of the session, but try not to let them ask reading questions. If necessary, cut them off politely and let them know that it will affect your reading if you know any information in advance. I have to do that frequently, where I tell people, I'm like, please don't tell me anything until I've already made my connections, because it really does affect your connection, because then you start second guessing. Am I receiving this message because this is what they told me, what my client told me, or am I receiving this message because I'm receiving it from a spirit or guide? You don't even want to have to deal with that. So the best way to not have to deal with whether or not you're getting a message, whether you're receiving a message, is to not have the information from them in advance. All right, before you begin your reading, as you begin your session, remember to read and connect with your client's energy. So this is where you're getting into the meat of this. You've done your disclosure. So now you're ready to start the reading, okay? Most likely you will have accomplished this while going through the beginning of your session with them. So as you're doing your disclosure and as you're talking to people and as they come in and they sit down with you, that's where that chit chat and the disclosure really help with building that rapport with them and building that energetic connection. If you're going to do a mundane action, remember, like something like this, or like, some of the other readers that we all know and love that are very talented and on TV that sit there and scribble. That's a mundane action. Now would be the time to implement it into your session. You may need to do a little explanation for your client if they are asking you what you are doing. So, if somebody's sitting there scribbling, I'd imagine that the client might be like, what are they doing? Or if I'm sitting there playing with my little ball, the little crystal ball, I'll sit there and I'll tell them, I'm like, well, it's a great hand massage. Or something like, realistically, part of the reason I do is because I have found that if you do not create your own mundane action, sometimes your subconscious will take over. I used to find that I would pick my cuticles, and by the end of a session, that was not a good look. Just saying. So this little ball has saved my cuticles. So having a mundane action that you can do is helpful, okay? But they may ask you for an explanation. Remember to breathe and stay relaxed and let the messages begin to flow when you do start the reading. If they ask you for that explanation, just do what I just told you. Oh, I do this so that I don't pick my nails because my subconscious likes to take over. Okay, now we're all relaxed. We're sitting with our client. We've done our disclosure and we're ready to get going. We are connected energetically with them. Now you're going to do a reading and you're going to use your breadcrumb trail tools to help you connect with the energies of their guides and or the spirits that are in the room. Start sharing messages and remember to share them ethically. So as you start tuning in and you start receiving the messages, remember that, you become a multitasker. Okay, so you're trying to remember to take your client's emotions into consideration, hence the 3 C's, when you're conveying messages, and you're still interpreting the messages. So you're talking either to their guides or you're talking to their loved ones. You're receiving these messages and you're still having to communicate with your person and do it ethically. So it does take practice. Use your intuitive and empathic skills to judge how to share the messages. Okay, implement the tree of energy links after building your energetic connection with your client. So important, because as we go through, depending on how long your reading is, I always suggest people start off with shorter readings so you can get used to doing this. But, you may go from one link to another, kind of like we discussed in the, previous classes. And it helps you to be able to communicate as many messages as you can, depending on, how long the session is. So now you can begin to speak with their guides and or loved ones from the other side and use the links to expand upon the information. That's why those links are so important. You will want to, and in the breadcrumb trail where you're building your description and building your link with the people that are actually on their side too. You'll want to grow with the flow of the reading. Follow the breadcrumbs of each bit of information to expand the messages that you're receiving. Remember how I told you had to wear 2 hats? You're the psychic reader and you're sometimes the, empathetic coach, the considerate coach. You want to be able to share the messages, and sometimes you may need to expand upon it through your intuition to be able to share comforting additions to the messages, which are also valid, messages too. Remember to feel every bit of energy and information that you're receiving. We are all about the feeling. Our six senses are all about feeling messages, hearing, seeing them, with their clairvoyance and all of that. It's still we're all still feeling all of this. So you are the vessel in which the messages flow through. Translating the energy of the messages is your job now. So you want to relax and share. Remember, you're doing this because you're supposed to like it. You're supposed to enjoy helping people. So getting really stressed and tensed up is not going to help you relay messages. So if you find yourself getting kind of tensed up like this, take a deep breath and then go into your next message. Okay. If you hit a wall, again, breathe and ask for more information. You've already made connections at this point. So if you're hitting a wall with one branch, maybe ask the guides to share another message with you, or if you're supposed to shift to a different spirit or guide, if no one's no longer giving you messages, then sometimes that's what you need to pay attention to. Sometimes I'll be talking to one spirit, like say someone's mom, and then she just stops talking and I'm like, okay, next. That's in my head, not out loud. And I'll jump over to maybe someone's dad because now he's got his bit to share. And then maybe I am finished with that. And so I go to somebody's guide. So again, that multitasking and just making your own intuitive decision on which person to go to or which spirit or guide. Once you have fully connected to your client or sitter's guides and or loved ones from the other side, and you have shared all of the messages that you've received in full and in total detail, then and only then should you ask them if they have any questions. I will get to the point where I feel like I have, and you, again, intuition, your gut instinct, I will get through the majority of the session. And then sometimes if I'm talking too much and I know my time's getting close, I will stop and ask somebody, do you have any questions at this point? Because I like to make sure that I've covered my bases and make sure things are thorough, but I'm doing it in consideration of my client's needs, not because I cannot continue to connect with things. Can you see the difference? So if they ask any questions, use your tree of energy links to access and expand upon the messages you receive regarding those questions. Another aspect of that too is it's rare, but every once in a while, someone will be like, well, do you see my brother, for example? Because maybe I haven't spoken with that person yet. Why? Because maybe mom and dad dominated the reading and brother took a back seat. So sometimes I will ask out, like in my head, okay, is the brother available to speak? Is he here? And then lo and behold, bada bing, bada boom, there he is. He pops up. I don't ask them for details about the brother because they're already sending out the signal that they want to speak to their brother. So brother is still almost too much information, but at least it's something you can work with if you haven't spoken with them yet. That alone, just them sharing they want to talk to their brother, should give you the link that you need to use your breadcrumb trail to build out the image and give the description to your client or sitter and give the information that that person's relaying. Okay. You shouldn't have to rely on them giving you information because then we fall all the way back to doing the fishing situation. Okay, guides and loved ones from the other side should have shared enough information with you in a shorter reading to have filled that much time at minimum. So if you're doing a session for someone that is, 30 minutes or less, you should not need to ask questions. If you have your timer set properly and it goes off and you realize that you have been sharing messages the entire time, that's another reason for the timer, because sometimes at that point I'll be like, "Ooh, okay, Jen, put the brakes on. Let's see if they have a question that you haven't covered." Okay. But really with the shorter readings, you shouldn't need, if it's 30 minutes or less, you should not need to ask your client anything. They really should be able to come in and sit down in front of you, say hi, do the chit chat, you did your disclosure, you got your energy link. Once you've got your energy link, you should be good for at least 30 minutes. It's intimidating to do longer readings at first. That's why I encourage people to practice shorter sessions at first, like 15 to 30 minutes. Okay. When you have reached the timer going off near the end of your session or reading, excuse me, sorry. At that point, feel free to start disengaging your connection from your client. Okay. This is when we start pulling back a little bit. We finish up the final messages. If anybody has anything, I cannot tell you how often, once that timer goes off, all of a sudden, even the spirits in the room, because there's still people, even the spirits in the room will be like, oh, wait, tell them I love them. Is that kind of a cheesy, non-evidential, little blurb for you to share? Yes, it is. But sometimes it's actually, sometimes these are valid messages that they really want you to get through because they do love them, right? At least that's the goal. That's the hope. So at that point, when you start kind of disengaging your energy from your client or sitter, that's when you can kind of share those final messages. Use statements like, it looks like our time is nearly finished. Do you have any final questions? This does more than just let your client know that the time is almost up. It also helps you with separating that energetic connection, and it helps to just kind of start simmering down the energy in the room. Okay. You may also want to allow yourself a few minutes at the end to discuss, I sound like Scotty, to discuss or review what happened during the session, depending on your client or sitter. That's also a lot of times why I will leave like 10, 15 minutes in between sessions, because sometimes at the end, somebody can be very emotional because they are emotional situations. A lot of times people are looking for answers, closure. I could list things for a while, but you kind of get where I'm going with that. Any of you that ever had a reading know from the, shoe on the other foot situation, what it's like to be in that seat. And then the timer goes off and you're just like, no, right? So once the session is complete, if it is an in-person session, stand up and thank them for seeing you. Okay. Also, you can thank them over the phone or virtually, obviously. Readings can be emotional and some people are huggers. So decide in advance if this is something that you're comfortable with doing, if asked at the end of the session. Maybe you have health reasons or not. There's different reasons for everything, but you need to decide beforehand if that's something you're comfortable doing. And if it's not, then just kind of keep your body language to that degree. If you're only doing readings for friends or family, make sure that they are aware of this so that they don't spread your name around. When I first started doing readings, I was just doing them for friends. I was just trying to help them out. And next thing I know, they would go and tell people, oh my gosh, you won't believe what my friend so-and-so said about blah, blah, blah. And I ended up with people showing up at my doorstep, calling me that I didn't know. I'm like, who are you and how did you find out that I even could do this? So that's why you want to make sure that if you are just doing them for friends and family, that they are not going to go and tell everybody, so that you don't end up with a plethora of random people contacting you. However, if you are doing this as a business or building a practice, then make sure that you have a way for your client or sitter to contact you again or to refer others to you. It's good to have, just easy cheesy business cards, Vistaprint, easy peasy. Final note, after a session, do not forget to do world's fastest meditation. Clear your space energetically with white light and drink lots of water. Anytime that you are in a session, that energy goes whoop, and it's like this the whole time. And so in between sessions, maybe you're just doing one session and you just clean and clear afterwards. You need to remember to take a break afterwards too. Again, that's the reason I do that 10 to 15 minutes. One, it's so you can have a potty break if you're doing consecutive sessions. And two, so that you have a minute to take a deep breath, clear your space, clear yourself, all of the above. Okay. So congratulations, you finished the Can You Be a Medium course, minus the bonus if you're on here live. For those that have joined me live, please stay with me for the Q&A after this class. If you would like additional training with me, Private Abilities training sessions are available at the canyoubeamedium.com website. Shameless plug there. But it is valuable if you're going through the class and you have a lot of questions or maybe you want some individualized, training, then that's the way to do it. All right, week 10 finale. Yay. Thank you for joining me on our adventure with discovering your abilities. Next week is the bonus week for those of you, again, that are joining me live. or who have purchased the package that includes the bonus. Remember, practice, 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 and start off with small little readings and then grow as you go. And then next week, we'll go into things like how to do that with the bonus class on the business end. So we're going to do some manifestation and some how to build this into a business on the bonus class. Okay, and don't forget, most important thing, always read ethically. Thanks, guys.